When we think of the classic English novel, we often imagine something very orderly: tea, polite conversation, and a strict adherence to social rules. But E.M. Forster's 1908 novel, A Room with a View, is really about the moment those rules start to crack. It's a story about the tension between the life we are told to lead, the one that is polite, predictable, and safe, and the life that actually feels real, even if it's messy or even a little bit dangerous. While they are sorting out their accommodations, they meet the Emersons. George Emerson is a young man who lives with a certain kind of uninhibited vitality that immediately makes Lucy feel both confused and strangely alive. His father, Mr. Emerson, is even more unconventional. He's a man who rejects the rigid, often hollow religious dogmas of the time, preferring to focus on the yes of life, the direct, visceral experience of being human. As Lucy spends more time in Florence, she finds herself caught between two worlds. On one hand, there is the world of Miss Bartlett and the English social circle, which is all about decorum, etiquette, and avoiding scandal. On the other hand, there is the world of the Emersons and the raw sensory beauty of Italy. A turning point occurs when Lucy meets an eccentric woman named Mrs. Lavish, who encourages her to stop following her guidebook and start actually experiencing the city. The tension between her social obligations and her growing desires reaches a peak when the group travels to the hills of Fiesole. On a secluded terrace covered in violets, Lucy and George share a passionate kiss. It is a moment of pure, natural connection, but it is abruptly interrupted by the voice of Miss Bartlett. That voice acts like a physical barrier, pulling Lucy back from the edge of her own desires and slamming her back into the realm of social expectation. Lucy finds herself in what she calls a muddle. This is a recurring idea in the book, the idea that human emotions are rarely neat or tidy. They don't fit into the neat little boxes that society provides. Under the weight of this muddle and feeling the pressure to maintain her reputation, Lucy makes a decision that seems to satisfy everyone but herself. She agrees to an engagement with a man named Cecil Vyse. Cecil is the complete opposite of George Emerson. He is an intellectual and an aestheticist. To Cecil, beauty is something to be studied, categorized, and displayed, much like a piece of art in a museum. He doesn't want a partner to experience life with, he wants a woman to refine and civilize. He views Lucy almost as an object to be curated. He loves the idea of her, the idea of a beautiful, cultured Englishwoman, but he has very little interest in her actual, living, breathing self. When Lucy returns to England with Cecil, the suffocating nature of her new life becomes clear. Her engagement is a performance. She is constantly managing her behavior to suit Cecil's intellectual standards and her family's social expectations. The rift between her internal reality, the girl who felt the heat of the Italian sun and the shock of the stabbing, and her external life as a refined fiancée is widening. The breaking point arrives when Cecil's brand of cultivated masculinity is finally challenged. Cecil views the world through a lens of control and etiquette, a way of governing the emotions of others to keep everything orderly. George Emerson, who has remained in the periphery of Lucy's life, delivers a scathing critique of this way of living. He argues that Cecil's kind of love is hollow because it seeks to govern a woman rather than engage with her passion. In a moment of profound clarity, Lucy realizes that Cecil loves the idea of her, but he doesn't actually see her. She realizes that by staying with him, she is choosing a life of beautiful, well-decorated emptiness. She breaks off the engagement, a decision that causes a massive social scandal and leaves her facing the disappointment and judgment of her family and her circle. But the ending isn't about the scandal, it's about the aftermath. Lucy chooses George. They leave the stifling atmosphere of English social life and move to Italy. The book ends with them living a life that is authentic, though Forster is careful to note that it isn't necessarily a happily ever after in the fairy tale sense. He suggests that life, once you actually start living it, is complicated and carries its own set of challenges. They have traded the safety of social conformity for the beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of a real life. When we look back at the story, the central metaphor of the room and the view becomes much clearer. The room is the life of social propriety, the narrow, enclosed space where you are safe from judgment because you never do anything unexpected. The view is the expansive, often overwhelming reality of human experience. Forster is suggesting that while the room offers comfort, it also limits the soul. There is a fascinating tension in the way Forster handles the concept of aesthetics. We see two different ways of experiencing beauty. For Cecil, beauty is a commodity, something intellectualized and controlled. It's a way to decorate a life without actually having to feel anything deeply. For George, beauty is visceral. It's something that hits you, something that moves you, something that is tied to the very pulse of existence. The conflict of the novel is essentially a fight over which of these two modes of living is more true. The character of Miss Bartlett is also essential to understanding this struggle. She isn't a villain in the traditional sense. She is a woman who has been trained by her society to believe that propriety is the highest good. Her attempts to protect Lucy are actually attempts to keep her within the boundaries of what is acceptable. In this way, Forster is critiquing the way social structures act as a form of soft control, shaping our desires and limiting our agency under the guise of morality. We also have to consider the concept of the muddle. Forster uses this word to describe the messy, non-linear nature of human emotion. Society wants us to be certain, to know exactly who we are, what we believe, and who we should marry. But Forster suggests that human life is inherently muddled. We are often caught between what we think we should do and what we actually feel. By embracing the muddle, Lucy is essentially embracing her own humanity. Ultimately, A Room with a View is a celebration of vitality over decorum. It's a book that asks us what it costs to be respectable. It suggests that the price of a perfectly curated, socially acceptable life is often the loss of the very things that make life worth living: passion, spontaneity, and genuine connection. Lucy Honeychurch's journey is a movement from being an observer of life to being a participant in it. She moves from looking at the world through a window to stepping out into the street, even if she doesn't quite know where she's going.